Can you hear me? Yeah. This week's Parsha is named Vayikra, which means and he called. I love the name because it makes me think of Yahweh, our Father, calling out to us. He wants us to be in relationship with him. As we ended up the book of Exodus, we saw the finished tent of meeting assembled. Then the cloud of Yahweh's glory covered and filled the place. In verse 34 of chapter 40, we learn that Moshe was unable to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled upon the tent. Because Moshe had a sin nature, he was prevented from entering the holy presence of Yahweh. In Leviticus, we learn who can enter his presence and how this is to be done. Reading from Vayikra, chapter 1, verse 1, Adonai called to Moshe and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, "Speak to the people of Israel. Say to them, when any of you brings an offering to Adonai, you may bring your animal offering either from the herd or from the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he must offer a male without defect. He is to bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting so that it can be accepted by Adonai. He is to lay his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. He is to slaughter the young bull before Adonai, and the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, are to present the blood. They are to splash the blood against all sides of the altar, which is by the entrance to the tent of the meeting." This passage describes the korban offering. It means to draw near. In chapter 4, we read about another offering, the sin offering, the chatah. Adonai said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel, if anyone sins inadvertently against any of the mitzvot of Adonai concerning things which should not be done, if he does any one of them, then if it is the anointed Kohen who sinned and thus brought guilt on the people, he is to offer Adonai a young bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he committed. He must bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before Adonai, lay his hand on the bull's head, and slaughter the bull in the presence of Adonai." A couple of things stand out to me here. The one who sinned had to come up with the animal. That person had to put their hand on it and slaughter it himself. So, where did he get the animal, and what did it feel like to look him in the eye as he killed the calf? I don't know about you, but when I hear about a herd of cattle, I think about the old cowboy shows like Rawhide or Bonanza. There were huge herds of cattle with bunches of cowboys riding them with their lassos in the air, dust kicking up. The cattle were led to the stockyards, slaughtered, and sent to the markets and sold, kind of like today. No one gets personal with a cow that ended up in their McDonald's hamburger. No, I don't think this was the case, and I will tell you why. Recently, I was in a prayer meeting with a farmer. He had 3 cows, one male calf named Bruce. He loved this calf. He was like family to him. That is why he named it. The day came, though, when he had to kill it to provide food for his family. He asked us for prayer to be able to do it because he knew how painful it would be to kill him. It was going to cost him something to eat the hamburger. That was a personal sacrifice. Sin cost. It is expensive. In my 7 decades of life, I have seen how my sin and the sins of others has affected marriages, families, employees, and the community of the saints. If it isn't dealt with, it spreads and destroys relationships. It can lead to death. In the camp of the Israelites, sin was personal, but it was also corporate. Sacrifices were made for the priests, the leaders, and the individuals. It was a public event. The one who offered the animal had to put a knife to the throat of the innocent animal in front of the others. Now, let's look at a different calf, the one that became a focal point of the congregation back in the book of Exodus. Aaron fashioned a molten image from gold donated by the Israelites. In Exodus 34, he took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." This golden calf was created for people to worship. It became a substitute god for Israel and offered the people, now here's the point, some control over their lives. In their minds, they could give into the lusts and desires of the flesh while still having a God. It got the people into big trouble and led to the death of thousands of Israelites. Unfortunately, the people of Israel didn't learn their lesson because they repeated their rebellion again. Once again, the people were convinced that golden calves were their God. Jeroboam, the leader of the northern tribes, didn't want them to return to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of the Lord, to give their sacrifices. He wanted control. In 1 Kings 12:27-28, it says, after seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." Same words, same results, except this time the people were driven from the land, scattered and forgotten. These words, "Here are your gods," should have set the antenna of the Israelites quivering, and it did for some. In 2 Chronicles 11, it says, "Those from every tribe of Israel who set their hearts on seeking the Lord, the God of Israel, followed the Levites to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. They decided to leave the northern tribes and return to the God of their fathers. Yahweh, in his mercy, commanded the burnt and sin offerings to be made so that people could be restored to relationship with him. When an Israelite sinned and brought the required sacrifice to the tabernacle, in essence, he was saying that he had given into his beast nature and therefore caused a rift between himself, his God, and his people. He sought restoration through the sacrifice. This was not a one-time sacrifice that covered all future sin. No, future offenses would require more sacrifices and more innocent animals dying. The sacrificial requirements that we will be studying in the book of Leviticus point to the only perfect once and for all sacrifice, that is Yeshua, the perfect, sinless Son of God who received the death penalty for the sins of all the people of the world. This cost his Father. It is difficult to comprehend how great a price the Father paid to redeem us. Although the experience I'm going to relate to you now doesn't even come close, it helps me to relate. Back when I was in my 20s, I was living out my little house on the prairie fantasy. At that time, my husband, daughter, and I lived in a log cabin at the foot of a mountain in southern Colorado. We had a couple of sheep that produced a lamb. One day, that beautiful little lamb showed up on my dinner plate. After my first bite, I burst out crying and left the table. I couldn't bear to eat meat of that beautiful little lamb that I held in my arms and petted each day. Since I've accepted Yeshua as my Savior, I have turned away from him many times and have tried to control my life. Each time I felt the pain of separation and have turned back to him. I've had to come public with my sin and seek forgiveness. He has always been there to receive me. What a great Father and Savior we have.